Wednesday. Stand that there. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Hi, Blaine. You're my first one today. Comment hello when you're on so I know who's watching. Oh, Lauren's there as well. Hi, Lauren. Six people on so far. Hope everybody's had a nice day in the sun. Hi, Alyssa. Hi, Ryan. I've just been sat in the sun, Ryan, this afternoon, writing the quiz questions for our quiz tomorrow for our catch-up. Hi, Mum. Lauren's been in her tent reading to JB in the garden. Oh, I bet that was so nice. I love seeing the pictures of Jonathan Brown in the garden. He looks more in his natural habitat than he does when he's in his tank. Hi, Freddie. Hi, Mrs. Henderson. Hi, Darcy. Glad you caught up on the new book, Darcy, and I'm glad you like it so far. I got your message. While we're waiting, just put a comment and tell me what you've been doing today or the last couple of days if you haven't been on for a few days. Yeah, because we didn't do this yesterday, so just comment, tell me what you've been doing. Hi, Liv. Hi, Miss Watson. Yesterday was your birthday. I did remember that, Ryan. We talked about it the other day. Freddie playing on the Nintendo Switch. Oh, Darcy's made waffles. Yummy. What did you have your waffles with, Darcy? I think my favourite breakfast ever still is that one at Arthog where you have the big waffle, bacon and syrup. Hi, Mrs. Breen. Going on walks, lots of playing with my little sister. That's good. Good to hear people going on walks. I've been on a walk today. It's nice to get out in the weather. I think sometimes, even if we're in the garden, if you're having one of those moments where you're either a bit bored or a bit fed up or anxious about coronavirus or lockdown or anything, going for a walk cheers you up straight away. Just, I think, being in nature and fresh air. Oh, hi, Steph. Oh, Nutella on your waffles. Nutella, I think, is my second favourite pancake topping after lemon and sugar. Yum, yum. Year 5s, did you enjoy Macbeth today? That was your home learning for today, to listen to me reading Macbeth in my questionable Scottish accent. It's a lot more fun doing a Scottish accent when you're in a classroom of children laughing at the Scottish accent than it is in your living room on your own. Oh, Ryan, you've been jogging. Well done. If you've commented and it hasn't come up yet, comment again and see if it does. So we're about to find out, aren't we, in the next section of the book, what's inside that den that Fred found. So their plane has crashed in the Amazon rainforest in Brazil, and there's 4 children survived, isn't there? There's Fred, there's Con, who seems a bit stroppy, could we say? She's a bit stroppy. And then there's Lila and Lila's little brother who's 5 called Max. And they ran away from a snake. They found a clearing. They don't know what to do. They're arguing about what to do, aren't they? Whether to try and go back and find the plane, that's what Con wants to do, or whether to stay there and wait for people to come and look for them once people realise their plane has crashed, because they were heading to a town called Manaus. And then Fred's realised that there's a den in the clearing because he's noticed that the trees have been cut down with an axe rather than just fallen, and therefore that means that there must have been human life there either now or in the past. So he's just about to look inside, isn't he? Give it a couple more minutes, or maybe just one more minute. Oh no, it's 25. It's 5 minutes after. Let's make a start. Anyone can always catch up, can't they? So, Con didn't want him to go into the den. She thought there could be jaguars or snakes in there. Lila said he needs to be really careful. And then Fred pushed aside the vines hanging down between the logs. Ah! He winced. Some of the tendrils had tiny but vicious thorns, and they'd caught in one of his cuts. He brushed away another handful of vines and froze. His heart, which hadn't stopped double beating since the crash, quickened to triple speed. The trees met to make a tent, high enough for a man to kneel in, or for someone Max's height to stand. The air smelt deep green. There was a spider web in one corner, and below it was a pile of banana leaves, stacked a dozen leaves thick in the shape of a sleeping mat. They had been almost entirely devoured by ants. Fred looked up and felt his eyes stretch wide. "Come and look at this," he called. The space between the 4 tree trunks had once been covered in a roof of plaited palm leaves. He reached up and touched them. The palms were riddled with holes, half rotted, and the light shone through, but he could see how intricately they'd been woven. So what's this telling us about this den and the person or people that created it? The fact that they're all rotting away and things. They're obviously not living in it at the moment, are they? So it could be a while ago. He crawled further in, slowly, looking for snakes in the green light. The ground squelched under his hands. In the far corner of the den was a hollow gourd, rotten with mildew. Fred touched it gingerly. It was mulchy. He turned it upside down, wrinkling his nose at the smell. A cascade of flints spilt out. Half had been chipped into the shape of arrowheads. Others were square and squat, large as a fist. "You too!" He crawled backwards and stuck his head through the vines. "Come in! Quick, you have to see this! Someone was here!" "You're crazy," spat Con. "If someone was here, they won't want us trespassing. I've had enough of this." She turned and began to march back into the trees. "Wait, Con, we shouldn't split up," called Fred. Infuriated, he scrambled out of the den and ran after her. "Whose house is it?" She turned to face him. Fred was startled. There were tears in her eyes. "You don't know, do you?" "Of course I don't," said Fred. "But I just think, what if they come back? I've read about it in..." Con hesitated, casting around for an idea. "Goldilocks. I know how it ends. I'm not getting eaten." "I'm pretty sure this place wasn't built by bears," said Fred. "It could be cannibals." "Cannibals are mostly a myth," said Lila. "Says who?" "Everyone. Scientists." So the other day when I read the names of their mum and dad, I said Mama and Papa, like in the olden days. But we don't actually know when this is set, and I don't know whether it's Mama and Papa like in the olden days, or whether it's Mama and Papa. I'm going to go with Mama and Papa, because I think that's maybe more what they might say in another country. So cannibals are mostly myths, said Lila. Says who? Everyone. Scientists. Our Mama and Papa. How do they know? Mama grew up in the jungle near the Solomos River, and she's a scientist. A botanist. Botanist, said Max. Con scowled at him, the nerves in her face twitching. You overrate the wit of the word bottom. Lila put a protective arm around Max and went on as if she hadn't been interrupted. And our Papa's English. He studies the plants of the jungle for medicine. And our grandmother was a scientist's assistant. We were supposed to be going to visit her in England. We were going to get the boat from Manaus. She wanted to meet us before she died. She wanted to see what Max was like. Con snorted. Perhaps it's just as well we crashed. Lila ignored that. Listen, whoever lives here, if they come back, might be able to take us to Manaus. Or they could eat us for dinner, said Con. She stared from Lila to Fred, angry and bewildered. Just come inside, said Fred. You'll see, nobody's been here for ages. Grudgingly, very slowly, Con turned round. She bent down and edged into the shelter. Lila and Max followed. Fred pulled at the rotten leaves lining the roof. We could weave new leaves for the ceiling, he said, and make new beds. Then it would smell less like a sock. He began gathering armfuls of half-decomposed foliage and pushing it outside. Underneath, the earth was soft and dusty. It smelt of 1,000 warm days, layered one over the other. Lila brought in an armful of leaves, each as big as a pillowcase. She began to lay them down for beds. And we could hang some extra vines over the front of the den, said Fred, so nothing can see in. Con crouched in the shelter with her arms crossed. Who died and made you king? She asked. Nobody. Fred turned, startled. But if we're going to sleep here, we might as well make it waterproof. I'm not sleeping here, said Con. Someone could come back here any second. But they won't, said Fred. Did you see those flints? Yes. They're covered in moss, he said. So they're dirty. Fine. How is that supposed to be reassuring? Said Con. It means they're old, said Lila. It's deserted. But why do you want to risk it? Said Con. What if they come back and think we're intruders? Or what if they're never coming back and they've left behind this shelter? Said Lila. Her voice wasn't loud, but there was a toughness to it. If someone was here, that means someone else thought it was a good place to rest. It means it's safe. But you can't know for sure. But we can't know anything for sure, said Fred. Lila's right. As soon as we work out how to get out of here, we'll leave. But until then, it makes sense to stay in a place where other people have been. Unless they eat us, said Con. I'm staying here, said Max. I want to live in the tree tent, and if you make me move, I'll do a wee on you. No, you won't. Con backed away, smacking her head on a tree trunk. He does sometimes do that, said Lila, which, for the moment at least, more or less settled it. So Con's still quite stroppy, isn't she? I wonder if she's stroppy because she's a stroppy person, or I wonder if she's actually really frightened, so she's just acting stroppy because she's really frightened. A few more people on. Oh, Mrs. Kaczynska's on. Hi, Mrs. Kaczynska. Hi, Mrs. Green. Hi, Julie. Okay, next chapter is called The River. Nice illustrations again. Oh yeah, look, it's illustrations of a river. Look, there's fish and stuff. Okay. It took some time to find leaves wide and strong enough for the roof. The first batch Fred tried tore in his hands. The second turned out to have something in them that made his skin turn red and itchy. But the third tree had fleshy leaves as long as his arm. He and Lila tore them into strips and then wove them into great squares, which they wedged in and out of the branches on the supporting trunks. Con sat on the grass outside the den, digging a hole in the ground with a twig. Fred crawled into the den and looked up. The sun no longer filtered through 1,000 ant holes. The light inside was dark green, an underwater sunken treasure colour. He felt an unexpected surge of triumph roar through him. "It's good!" he called. "You can barely see the gaps." He heard Lila cheer. Fred backed out of the den and stood up too fast. Suddenly his head reeled, colours flashing in front of his eyes, his lungs tied in a double knot. "Are you all right?" asked Leila. Lila or Leela? I can't remember what I said before. Lila. "Fine," he said, more brusquely than he'd intended. Since his pneumonia, he hated being asked if he was all right. He tried to smile. "Thanks," he added. Fred had been sent to Brazil to convalesce with a distant cousin. The cousin's idea of a good time involved more playing bridge in a dark drawing room than Fred had expected, but his father had said it was the only sensible option. Oh, so Fred's been poorly with pneumonia, and convalesce means like to get better if you're like recovering from something. So that's why he's been sent to Brazil to live with cousins. We're finding out more about the characters, aren't we? "I can't be at home to look after you," he'd said. "The firm needs me." "I can look after myself," Fred wheezed. "That's not possible," his father had said gruffly. He had worked longer and longer hours each year, ever since Fred could remember. Fred could not remember his mother's face, except when he was asleep. Oh, so his mother's obviously died, something else we've learnt about Fred. He'd never seen his father dressed in anything other than a suit, and over time the suit seemed to have seeped into his father's skin. His voice practically wore a tie. "You're treating me like a baby," Fred had said. "Nonsense," his father replied. "Come on, you're a sensible boy." Fred's boarding school report always contained that word, sensible. An unobtrusive presence in the classroom. Sometimes, when they could clearly think of nothing else that distinguished him from his classmates, they added, "increasingly tall." Fred knew he was none of those things. Imagine that. Imagine if I wrote in your reports how you were doing and then put, "he's very tall." Weird thing to put. Fred knew he was none of those things, or rather, he was tall. Nobody would have argued about that. He grew out of clothes so fast that his ankles were constantly cold. But he was not unobtrusive inside, nor was he sensible. Inside, Fred was hunger and hope and wire. It was just that there had never yet been a chance to prove it. His father always insisted so unswervingly on clean shoes and unrebellious eyebrows. But Fred's mind was quick, with sharp edges. He wanted more from the world than it had yet given. Now he tried to grin at Lila. "I'm just dehydrated. We need to find something to drink," he said. "You can live for a long time without eating." "No, you absolutely can't," said Max indignantly. "But you can't live for long without water." "Do you think we can drink from the—" Lila hesitated, searching for the words. "Tiny cesspool?" Fred looked across at the puddle of water. "We could, but I don't think we'd live very long if we did. But we're near the river. We must be," he said. "It was on our left when we crashed," said Lila eagerly. "Which direction did we run?" said Con. "Well, the sun rises in the east, so facing this way, left is northeast," said Fred. "How does that help, if we don't know which direction we ran?" snapped Con. She was pale and there were circles under her eyes, as if someone had pressed a paint-smeared thumb to her face. "It doesn't much," admitted Fred, but northeast of here was England. The thump in his chest slowed a little. Northeast led to his bedroom at home, his bookcase, his cricket bat propped up against the wall. It led to his father. Con squared her shoulders as if readying to fight. "Are we just going to guess then?" "I heard," Fred said, "that you can follow ants and they'll take you to water." "Ants?" said Con. "We're going to take directions from ants." Lila stared hard at Con and then at the ground, combing the leaves with her eyes. "Do you have a different suggestion?" she said. Con sighed and bent to look under a log. The first set of ants was a disappointment. Max found a trail of tiny red ones and bent down to stroke them. "Look, they're shining." "Don't touch," said Lila, snatching him back. "Some ants out here are dangerous." "These ones?" asked Con, taking a step backwards. "I don't know, that's the problem. The dangerous ones are called bullet ants, but I don't know what they look like." "Bullets, presumably?" said Con. Not necessarily, said Lila. Dogfish don't look like dogs. I remember being very disappointed. That's, I think, what we found on the beach at Arthog, some of you that were in my group. Dogfish, wasn't it? These ones just look like ants, said Max. You're still not allowed to touch them, said Lila, so don't try. They walked at a safe distance, all four of them with their chins on their chests, along a snaking line of trees. The ants led them to a large pile of leaves. Oh. Fred nudged the leaves with a stick, just in case there was water underneath. He recoiled. The ants were swarming over the carcass of a bird. It looked like it had once been a vulture. Now, though, it was equal parts bones and smell. This isn't exactly what I was hoping for. You could not, he thought, trust an ant's sense of priorities. What now, then? Asked Con, crossing her arms. Let's try again, said Lila. Maybe those were the wrong kind of ants. It was Lila who found the trail of larger ants, ants with heads as big as ball bearings. They followed the track deep into the woods, Lila leading. Fred watched her. She was small and moved on the edge of her muscles like an animal, a deer or a lemur, as she heard things other people did not. I can't believe we're trusting ants, said Con. She brushed a cobweb out of her hair and ducked under a branch. Even in fairy stories it's a wise owl or something. Nobody goes to ants for help. She looked defiantly at Fred, and then a thorn came on the skin above her eyebrow, and she let out a yelp. I hate this place! Fred looked back and found, with a lurch to his stomach, that the clearing had entirely disappeared. Which way is the way back? He said. The green of the forest seemed to thrum around them. Left at that tree that was covered in mushrooms, and then right at the bush with green thorns? Said Con. She didn't look at him, didn't see the surprise on his face, which he immediately tried to hide. We should mark a path, he said, so we can find our way back. Fine, said Con. Unless you want to ask the opinion of, I don't know, a passing maggot? Fred tried to grin. Well, maggots are much slower walkers than ants. They'd make terrible guides. She didn't smile back. Fred slipped to the back of the procession. Every 3 or 4 trees he broke a branch. Every 3 or 4 trees he broke a branch and stuck a leaf on the hinge it made. Con shook her head. That's not going to be any good. You need something bigger. She tore one of the ruffles off her once white blouse and tied it to a tree. There. Fred turned to look at her, crouched in the dappled light. She moved stiffly, as if unaccustomed to using her own body, and her clothes seemed to sit on her like a bear trap. There are outfits that suggest of their own accord that their owner should sit still and smile nicely. Con had been dressed in one such outfit, before the crash had coloured it brown and green and red. Good thing you've got ruffles to spare, he said, and grinned. Con turned on him, the kind of look that breaks noses. Shut up, cricket jumper. Fred took a step backwards. I only meant it's useful to have clothing with extra bits attached. Boys' clothes don't. Fine, whatever you say. You don't have to try to be nice to me, you know. What? Fred stared, bewildered. I just want to get out of this vile place and back to school. I don't mean to be rude, but I'm really not interested in making friends, especially not with little kids. Lila heard them. I'm not a little kid, she said quietly. She spoke without taking her eyes off the ants. I'm just small for my age. How old are you? Con turned to Fred. Fred told her. But that's hardly older than me, said Con. And me, said Lila. I thought you were much older, said Con. Fred shrugged. Just tall, he said. But that means there's no adults, not even any nearly adults, just 4 children, in the Amazon jungle. That, said Fred, sounds true. Unfortunately, said Lila. Unfortunately, echoed Max. He wandered off a few places, blowing nose bubbles with his snot. Lila darted after him and grabbed him by the sleeve. Stay close, she said. Her face was bones and eyes and nerves. As they walked on, a smell came to Fred on the air. Something sharp and fresh, something that smelt more blue than green. Is that the river? I think I can smell it, he said. Don't be ridiculous, said Con. You can't smell water. But then she broke off. Through the thickly ranged trees, Fred could see a flicker of something that moved. Come on, called Con. I've found the river. Ooh. Oh, Mrs. Naylor's on. Hi, Mrs. Naylor. Hi, Miss Sherry. Hi, Mrs. Reese. Okay. They stood where the ground curved down to meet the river. The river was a stark, bright blue. Do you think there are caimans? Lila asked. Despite the sun overhead, she shivered. In the long winter of Fred's illness, he'd read dozens of books about explorers venturing out into the wild, armed with only a pith helmet and a penknife. He had a shelf full, all dog-eared and food-stained, and they had all dwelt at great length on caimans. He decided to be honest. Probably, he said, but I don't know how else we're going to get water. What are caimans? Asked Con. Alligators, said Fred, like crocodiles, but with longer snouts. But they're smaller, said Lila. Probably. Probably, said Con. Oh, good. The caimans like the sunny side of the bank, said Lila, and we're in shade here, so we're probably fine. Everything's a risk here, said Fred. I'm going in. Every hair on his arms stood on edge as he scanned the bank. He pulled off his shirt, then put it back on again. It occurred to him that it needed washing as much as he did. He slipped down the bank, his feet squelching in the mud, and dived in head first. The river was a gift. It soothed the burn of his cuts and the ache in his feet. Fred trod water, then kicked downwards below the surface where it was colder, and sucked in a mouthful of water. It had a tang of mud to it, and a strand of waterweed wrapped itself around his tongue, but at that moment it was the most delicious thing he had ever drunk. Better than hot chocolate at Christmas or fresh lemonade in summer. Come in, he called. Lila plunged in after him, carrying Max on her shoulders. Con hesitated on the edge, her face stiff and anxious. We didn't do swimming at school, she said. Only ballroom dancing. She entered the water slowly and swam in a nervous doggy paddle, her chin high above the water. Fred rubbed his arms and legs, feeling his cuts sting as he scrubbed the dirt off them, then kicked below the surface again, his eyes open in the dark water. A shoal of miniature fish swam by, followed by a single larger one. He came up for air. They're fish! There's fish, he called. Try to catch one, called Con. Fred plunged down again. The small fish darted away as he grabbed at them. The larger fish ignored him completely, but there was something eerie in its shape, almost circular, like a swimming dinner plate. The fish turned. It bared its teeth at him. Fred sucked in a lungful of river water and shot, coughing, to the surface. Piranhas! He yelled. Get out! Max was floating near him. Fred grabbed him and struck out for the bank, fear pounding through his limbs. What are piranhas? Con asked. Fish with teeth. Con screamed a word Fred hadn't expected her to know, then swallowed a mouthful of water and disappeared under the surface. Lila, wild-faced, grabbed Con by the shoulders. Don't thrash, she said. She hooked one arm around Con's waist, kicking for the shore. Just breathe. Fred and Max scrambled up the bank, Con and Lila just behind them. They lay, panting, on the hot earth. Con let out a groan and spat out a mouthful of weeds. Fish! Fish with teeth! Nothing is safe here. You can't even trust a fish not to eat you. What else? Pigeons with fangs? Monkeys with guns? I read, Fred gasped, that they don't bite unless they're very hungry. They eat mostly small things, birds and frogs, said Lila. She wrung out her hair. It was covered in a dusting of red-brown river silt. It looked. Fred drew in a great breath and felt his heart begin to slow, like it wasn't going to do anything. It was actually quite beautiful, silver with a red belly. Beautiful? Con stared incredulously. As long as we're not bleeding into the water, we won't attract them, said Lila. I knew that, but I panicked. We're still safe to swim here. I think they'll ignore us. You think! Con was red in the face, sharp-boned, ferocious. They're fish with teeth! Piranhas! You can't psychoanalyse them! Lila looked at Con. Her face was inscrutable. I think, she said, that the plural of piranha is piranha, not piranhas. Oh, good, said Con. It's always nice to be grammatically correct when you're being eaten. They padded damply back to the clearing. Lila used her wet shirt to wipe the mud off Max's face as they went. Their bodies steamed in the sun as they dried. Coming back into the clearing felt surprisingly like coming home. A scarlet parrot alighted on a branch above Fred's head, cawed in surprise at the band of dripping children, and took off again. Fred found the sharpest of the flints and hacked off the bottom of his grey school trousers, making them into rough-edged shorts. The left leg was longer than the right, but he decided it didn't matter. The cut on his leg had begun to scab nicely. He pulled off his cricket jumper and wrung it out. Something in Fred was beginning to glow. Under the sun and the cry of the birds, and the great expanse of vivid green around them, it was huge and dizzying. It felt like hope. Either that, he thought, or concussion. And that's the end of that chapter, and it's 6 o'clock, so I think we'll stop there, because it's nice to end at the end of a chapter rather than part way through like last time. Oh, it's really exciting, isn't it? A real adventure that they're having. Our next chapter, ready for Friday, is called Food, and then in brackets, Almost. So I'm guessing soon they are going to start to get really hungry, aren't they? Maybe they'll go back to the river and try and get some of the little fish. I don't know. How will they know out of all the things that they've got there? Think about what you do in that position. You're in the Amazon. They found how to get water. How on earth are they going to find food? Because they might not know which plants are which. Some of the plants might be poisonous. See if you can think of a plan. That's something for you to do over the next 2 days. Maybe especially if you're out in the garden. Have a think of a plan. Imagine that you're stranded in the Amazon. What would you do? Exciting. Good. Oh, who else is on? Oh, Mrs. J's on. Hi, Mrs. J. And Mrs. Wood. Hi, Mrs. Wood. Good. I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their Wednesday evening. And I will see you on, well, staff, I'll probably see you later. We've got a virtual staff quiz tonight. My class, I'll see you tomorrow. I'm going to send out the emails tonight. And everybody else, I will see you for more of the book on Friday at 5:30 again. So I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you for tuning in. If you missed the start, or if any of your friends or anyone want to catch up, then this will be saved on the Facebook page and also on our YouTube channel later. I'm going to do that now. Look after yourselves, everybody. Bye.